when we complete 16, we complete 17, we have completed, like, I would say, the first foundational section of this discourse. Now, this discourse is quite long and goes on for, I believe, 30 some. Am I correct in that? I'm thinking 30 some sections. I'm thinking like 33-ish. Let's see. 32. All right. I was not correct. So this discourse has 32 sections. When we finish 17, that's like the basic foundational part. And then, of course, it continues. So our goal tonight is to finish this foundational section. And we know it's a very good demarcation long because at the end of section 17, we answer the first 3 of the questions that we raised in the very beginning of this discourse. Now, of course, at this point, you probably have no interest in the questions, or you probably maybe even forgot them because, like, well, like, we've been talking about a lot of very amazingly relevant topics. So the questions get very blurred because often in a study like this, the questions are the segue, they're the entrance to then talk about the topic. Of course, the heart of this discourse is talking about the topic, not per se, here's a question, here's an answer. But we do like to answer a question. So when we conclude section 17, we will answer the first 3 foundational questions of the very beginning of this discourse. So we are up to the 16. So we're going to do 16, and then we're going to do 17. Now, the point of 16 is to say that we've been discussing some rather negative traits of a human, like jealousy, insecurities, disliking other people, like not nice stuff about ourselves. And we've been looking with a pretty intense eye, pretty sharp eye, really poking and prodding those not such pretty parts of humans and really showing how actually ugly they really are. So what's a very normal reaction for a very normal person at this point is to say, oh, I'm glad that's not me. I mean, that's really ugly, but that's not me. I would never behave like that. So the Rebbe wants to say, well, maybe you do. You just do it in a far more refined, genteel, covered over, don't realize that you're doing it way that I'm discussing. I'm like, pulling away all the layers, all the skin, all the junk, and I'm just exposing the ugliness. When you do it, there's a lot of layers over it. We have a lot of layers that we deceive ourselves with, that we don't have to acknowledge our own not very nice traits sometimes. But by me, it's nothing like this person you're describing. The Rebbe says, of course I know. But it's still there. And if it's there, it's got to be worked through. So that's the point of this section. So we're going to do the details of this section, and then we'll continue with section 17. So the Rebbe says that everything I've been discussing, all of these negative traits, all of these horrible characters, could be in a very overt, coarse, revealed, despicable way, and could be very, very refined. Could just be little sprinklings of ugliness, little ones. It's possible. Every person, depending on where they're holding in life, where they're holding in their own spiritual service. Maybe you used to be a lot uglier when you worked on yourself. Yasher Koyach. So now you're far more refined than anyone I'm talking about here. But is it still there inside of you, even in a very minor way? Why do we have to get so personal? Like, why didn't you come inside of me in such a minor way? Everyone says, because it's so bad that even if it's in that minor way, you've got to acknowledge it and you've got to get rid of it. So the Rebbe says, sometimes something could be so small, maybe because your nature is more refined, or maybe because you did a lot of work on yourself, that you're not even aware of it at all. You truly don't think you have it. I mean, very often, I know for myself, very often I have this epiphany awakenings to my own not such pretty parts when someone outside of me makes a comment. And I'm thinking, really? Am I like that? me. But then I guess I am, because otherwise, why would they have thought that? And maybe if I look at myself, I can sort of try to see myself from their eyes and understand how they could think that. And maybe not everyone would think that, but if some people think that, that might mean it's there, but in a very subtle way. So subtle that I truly wasn't aware of it. Now, the truth is, again, the fact that I'm not aware of it doesn't prove how subtle it is, because there's a concept. Love covers over all flaws. Ava mechasa kol, I forget how it says in Hebrew, the last word, but love covers all flaws. If you're a healthy person, you've got a lot of self-love going on. That's good. That means you're healthy. We're glad. But because we have so much self-love, it's very hard for us to understand and see our own negative parts. It's very hard for us to see it because love covers flaws. That's a rule. That's how God created the world. So I'm just following the rules. I've got a lot of love for myself. Baruch Hashem, that's good. And therefore, since love covers flaws, I don't see my own flaws. And that could even be if the flaws are bigger. If you're doing a transgression, you could be doing something really wrong and be very oblivious. Sounds weird, but it's true. If you know about it yourself, it's not so wrong if you're doing it. And I do so many things right, it's sort of in my mind, just sort of washes away this really, really ugly piece of me. But it really doesn't work that way. Good is godly, is amazing, is unbelievable, and bad is evil. And those are two separate charts. Those are two separate lists. Baruch Hashem, the negative never washes away the positive, and the positive doesn't wash away the negative. But love covers over all flaws. So therefore, it's very hard sometimes to see ourselves. And that's why, of course, the concept of a mashpia, of we call it a did maven, a friend, a colleague that understands you, that you trust. These are very critical pieces when you're trying to work on yourself, because sometimes we can't really see ourselves. But the Rebbe says, even if it's very refined, so refined that nobody could see it. It's not just because you are so in love with yourself that you don't see it. Nobody can see it because it's so submerged, it's so hidden. You still have to look for it and uproot it if it's there. Meaning it's so small, you don't think it's there. But the Rebbe says, but if it is, you have to take care of it. Why do I have to take care of something like this if it's so minor that I don't even see it when I'm truly looking? Because the Rebbe says, we are talking about a comprehensive issue. The subject of this discourse, Hachaltzu, is the most comprehensive issue of evil. Baseless hatred, ego, division, divisiveness, nullifying other people because of self, jealous of other people because of self. All of this is the most foundational evil that encompasses everything. It's like the comprehensive energy. There could be lots of ugly individual qualities. But as long as they're an individual quality, it's not as bad. Meaning, let's say someone's a liar. Okay, yeah, that's a very bad trait. It could get you in a lot of trouble, and you get other people in a lot of trouble. It could get a lot of people very upset with you. You're not allowed to lie. It is a transgression. But one could be a liar, and it doesn't naturally lead to also being jealous. It doesn't naturally mean that if a liar, you're going to have a lack of order and structure in your life. It doesn't mean that if you're a liar, you're going to be sloppy on saying brachos. It's one specific problem. So because it's a bad problem, but because it's one specific problem, first of all, it's not as strong and intense. And second of all, it could stay just in its own issue and not spread to anything else. And we probably all know very nice people that have some significant weaknesses. But if you will put aside that specific area, they're amazing people. And there's just that one area that's really weak because it didn't spread to the other areas of self. So let's say someone, I don't know, has a hard time controlling their anger and they yell. That's a big problem. That's very unfortunate. That's very wrong. Feel bad for their husband, feel bad for their kids. But that doesn't mean that because they lose their temper and they yell, they lie. It doesn't mean because they lose their temper and they yell, they don't daven. It doesn't mean because they lose their temper and they yell that they're naturally jealous. It didn't have to flow to anything else. It's a specific problem. So the Rebbe says when we're dealing with specific traits and specific issues, it's not as strong as a overarching comprehensive issue, and it doesn't necessarily going to spread to anything else. It could stay in its own situation. But what we've been discussing in this discourse, this essence ego, essence separation from God, essence baseless hatred, that's overarching. Therefore, it is so powerful, and therefore it is automatically going to embrace within itself many other issues. Toby, do you have a question? I can't hear you because you're muted. I don't know if that was a stretch or a question.
And I'm okay. My hand goes to sleep, and raising it up makes me feel better.
No
Disregard
problem.
that.
I know, but thank you for doing that, because maybe that means somebody else has a question. Everything's hashgacha pratis. Does someone else have a question?
Right. So when you say it means, so that the ego, when the ego comes into play, which causes a distance, separation from Hashem. So this causes multiple negative traits to come in?
Exactly.
Or it presents itself in multiple.
Exactly, because once we have ego, almost anything could then flow from ego. I think at one point in this mimer, I was answering a question somebody sent me in our WhatsApp group. And I think the challenge was, could I find a problem that did not have in its roots ego, amid perhaps other things? And it was really hard. I think I found, but it was really hard. Meaning almost everything, if you think about it, really has a component of ego. Because ego is sort of that essence separation from God and that essence separation from man. That's what's causing it.
Negative, you're saying.
Exactly, yes, negative, exactly. So that's why the Rebbe is calling this the overarching principle of evil, is this quality we're discussing. And that's why the Rebbe is saying, search. I'm glad it's refined and not overt, but don't think it's not there just because you don't see it. It might still be there. And if it's there, because it's overarching and therefore can flow into all these other negativities, because it's so strong because it's overarching, you have to eradicate it. You can't be comfortable if you just have a little ego. No, the Rebbe says you got to get rid of it. You have to get rid of it. It's that damaging, destructive, dangerous. You have to get rid of it. If you think, as it explains in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe in chapters 20 through 22 of Tanya discusses the idea of the unity of God, Hachaltzu Hashem. Everything is Hashem, and there's nothing outside of Hashem's reality. And based on that, explains that every transgression is really idolatry, because every transgression means you're setting yourself outside God's oneness. You're saying there's God's oneness, but there's also me, or at least in this area of my life, there's also me separate from him. And what could enable a person to do that? Ego. Ego, sense of self, is what leads to the idolatrous state of viewing yourself separate from God's reality. And therefore, every transgression is a form of idolatry, and every transgression is an expression of ego. The ego of self outside of God's self. So that's why this quality is so entrenched in everything we do against God. And therefore, the Rebbe is saying it's that dangerous. It's that destructive. And therefore, as the Rebbe says, you have to search for it. search for it, search for it. And there's a search after search, like when you're searching, if you can imagine, like by chametz, we search with a candle. And we're told that the light of the candle is actually going to be better than the electric lights to show us what's going on. So the Rebbe says we all have a candle inside of us. It's a soul. The soul of man is a candle of God. So search with that candle of your soul, searching after searching with all the cracks and crevices to see, is it there on some level? Well, how would I know it's there if it's so refined? You know it's there because it's stopping you from progressing forward. It's stopping you from truly refining your character traits. So since every flaw has in its sort of roots this ego, this separation from God, if I don't see ego in me, I truly don't see it. I don't see ego. I don't see jealousy. I don't see hatred. I don't see any of those traits in me. But I see that I can't move forward and stop being whatever. The Rebbe says that's a sign it's there. Because it's blocking you from getting past and refining the flaws you are aware of. Because within the flaws you are aware of is the ego that you're not aware of. And that ego is so powerful, you're not getting past it, and therefore you cannot refine these traits. So that would be your clue in your, investigation work here, that you really do have it. As I see, because I'm not moving in my service in other areas as well. And you want to completely uproot it, because only then can you go confidently in truly serving God with prayer, truly serving God with bitul, with negation of self, truly serving God by refining your character traits, truly serving God by doing Torah and mitzvahs properly. All of these things are just waiting for you once you get past this hard to get past evil that could be lurking in a very refined way inside your heart. And that is section 16. Any questions on that? Masha, do you have a question?
I'm just joining for the first time now. Did Masha want to speak? I'm sorry, did she?
It's okay, you go ahead first. Fine.
Thanks. So it's my first time joining in. And I don't know.
So nice to have you.
Thank you. I don't know if this question is appropriate. I mean, for the group per se, but you're talking about like being focused with the ego too much, being the root of a lot of problems, and that people need to focus more, like try to notice more what is wrong and what they need to work on, and realize even if it's covered up. I got a lot of that, but my I want to be specific. I know someone who has a problem with anger, and this person wants the problem to just go away. So he sees it. Okay. But he doesn't know how to make it go away, obviously, because it keeps coming back. So you could say it's like a avodah zarah and all kinds of things like that you kind of can throw at it, all these things in Yiddishkeit that we know about that. But would you say that a person who has this problem could or should go for help? Because I'm thinking that there must be some foundation issues here behind that we need to work on to be more aware of, to help this problem to be better. Would therapy with like a from therapist be a good way to go, or do you have any
I think
suggestions?
that's such a case specific situation. I would very, very hesitant to answer because I don't know the case. And obviously it's a public forum, so I shouldn't know the case. So that's good.
Right.
But in general, there are definitely things that are your own spiritual work and no therapist is going to help you with. There are definitely things that are rooted in childhood traumas, in various issues that sometimes a sensitive person can help guide you to understand and to discover. And if you discover that it is from like childhood trauma or something along those lines, sometimes you can focus and with the therapist's help or yourself heal that child inside of you and then move on and not have that wounded child that keeps, you know, butting into all of these problems because they're scared and in pain. So it could be like this, it could be like this. Do I think therapy is wonderful? Not always, but sometimes. You know, it so depends on the person and of course the therapist. But what we're talking about here is not only for a person who has uncontrollable anger that we could wonder about is their therapeutic need, but really all of us. And that was actually the point of this section that we just learned, is that even if the trait is so minor, it could still be there. And of course, there is a Hasidic concept, as Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, that sometimes we see negativity in someone else to hold the mirror up and recognize it in ourselves. And of course, we could say, well, I don't have anything like that. But going back to what the Rebbe Rashab is saying here, maybe in a very minor form. So what does it help me to be aware that I have it in such a minor form when this person has it in neon colors? Because sometimes when we work on ourselves, it's one of the best ways we can help someone else with the same issue. So that's also something to think about and process, that sometimes, of course, you could say, I can't even find it myself. Well, therefore, it's helpful to have somebody else looking with you. But sometimes when we find it ourselves, we can also help the other person. Just 1 second. I'm going to do something for a second.
Thank you.
Say who's sponsoring this. Let me see if I have.
Your picture went blank and I'm not hearing anything. Is you connected?
Just coming back.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm back. The wonders of working from home.
I was going to say what you just explained, Cyril. That's what I was going to say. There's no way, if you can't see it in yourself, Hashem finds a way for us to figure it out. Because if you see something in someone else that bothers you, even if it's a small thing, if it doesn't bother you, then you know it has nothing to do with you. If it does bother you, then you go, where is that in me?
Exactly.
Exactly.
So you won't see it necessarily, but Hashem will help us.
Exactly. And Hashem does. And Elka's phrased it beautifully. She exactly gave you the test. When it doesn't bother you in the other person, it doesn't bother you because it's not resonating, because you don't have the issue. And when it does bother you, it bothers you because it's in you. So that could be Hashem and his kindness, his way of showing us something that is so refined, small, covert in us, but it's still there. And the Rebbe Shab's point here is, if it's still there, you need to work on it. Why do I need to work on it so much? Because it's blocking everything from moving forward. Like, you know, this concept of if you take one finger in front of your eye, you can block a whole sun. So it could be this very small issue, right? Like it says when Mashiach comes, it says our Yetzer Hara will see our Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara is an angel. And we're going to see it. And we're going to look at that little angel. We're going to be, what? You were the one who's giving me problems for the past 60 years? You, tiny little you? How did you bother me so much? Because that little Yetzer Hara gets right in front of your face and blocks everything. And like, that's all, you can't move forward. That's all you see. That's distorting your vision of everything. So we need to understand that it could be very refined, but that doesn't take it away from causing us major problems. Masha, what was your question?
Oh, hi. Forgive me if we've already discussed this. We might have, but you're talking about like eliminating the ego is what it sounded like, but isn't there an idea of Tanya about not destroying it, but turning it towards the good somehow? So you don't eliminate it. You don't just.
Okay, so in Tanya, in Hasidic thought, we speak about removing evil, and we speak about using it to serve God. But we're speaking about using it to serve God. We're speaking about things that are innately neutral, even if they're often used in a negative way. What's called in Hasidic in Kabbalistic terminology, klipas noiga. Our animal soul is klipas noiga. So as such, our animal soul, even though it's an animal and it's brute and it's ruled by Yetzer Hara, by the evil inclination, it gives us lots of problems, but it's still klipas noiga. And therefore, you can use it to serve God. And I believe it was last week I mentioned the Talmud that says a mohel, a sheichet, a doctor, a murderer all have the same nature. Their nature is all to spill blood. So you're going to take that nature and go to the depth of evil and be a murderer? Or you take that nature and elevate it to the heights of godliness and be a mohel or sheichet? You can turn that nature any way you want. It's klipas noiga. But ego, we're not viewing here in this fashion. We're viewing it as evil. Not as klipas noiga, it's klipas megas. And as such, we have to eradicate it.
But that approach might not work. Like if we do it the other way, we might be more successful. You know, like I'm just saying.
Maybe
like
try both. Try both.
Yeah.
In other words, whenever you're trying to take something that's potentially negative and utilize it positively, it's hard. Of course it's hard to get rid of it also, but it's hard. It's hard because it's very powerful, and it's generally very powerfully negative. So it's not so simple to say, oh, I'll have a great ego in serving God. I mean, one could say that, and in theory, one could do it, but it's not so simple, not from there to slide into ego. And that's why it's generally better to just say, no, I'm saying no to ego. Now, obviously, for each one of us, saying no to ego is going to look somewhat different because our ego manifests itself in different ways. And our saying no to it will look somewhat different. But we all, I am sure, if we make that commitment, we'll have so many opportunities to put the commitment to practice. So many opportunities, your family will start wondering what's going on. Because there's just all day long, there are things that challenge our ego. And if we disengage from the dance and we don't let ourselves be challenged and we just submit, it's like, well, that's weird. Why'd you do that? And she did it again. And she did it again. What is going on? What's going on is you're working to get rid of your ego. And it's a long, hard process, but it works.
How do you, let's say someone says something, you know, you're in a family situation and something happens that's not so nice, right? Now, sometimes I might ignore it and say absolutely nothing, okay? But even that, I feel, is not necessarily the nicest way to be. Like it by saying nothing, it's still kind of mean. Like it's leaving the.
It could be. Basically, what we have to do is understand. You have to understand we're sort of like on a hierarchy, on a ladder. And I totally agree with what you're saying, Masha, but a person also has to say, well, which rung am I striving now to achieve? So maybe for some of us, I'm striving to achieve the rung of keeping my mouth shut. And that's really difficult, and that's a real stretch. I'm going to keep my facial expressions calm and pleasant. I'm going to keep my energy peaceful. Let me keep my mouth shut. That's going to be a massive achievement. And when I've done that enough times, then I could go to the next rung and the next rung and the next rung. So you're 100% correct, but that doesn't mean somebody could naturally jump all those rungs. And what God says is, are you walking toward me? Are you climbing your ladder? So as long as you're climbing your ladder, we're good. That's what we say. A human is a mahalech. He moves. He's not stationary. So as long as you are better today than you were yesterday, great. God says, great, awesome, keep it up. And tomorrow you're going to be better. And the next day you're going to be better. And if I give you forever, you will master this because you're just going to keep inching forward. So it's okay. We shouldn't bash ourselves for what we're not doing as long as we can still see that we are doing. Any other questions on any of this? Okay, so let us now proceed to the final section we're going to do of this discourse, which is section 17. So what
Can
we
I go
just
back a sec? Can I go back a sec? Sorry.
sure, of course.
Masha was just talking about what you were just talking about. So if you think maybe that negative conversation is happening around you, if you think maybe the avoid is to keep your mouth closed, what could be, I'm trying to like, but it's still bothering you, what's going on? So, don't you, if it's bothering you, don't you still have to look in yourself to see why that's bothering you, even if you're not going to respond?
No, what she's saying, she knows she has ego. She's not, it's not, we know we have an ego here. That wasn't our question in this scenario. We know we have ego. And because we have ego, we're disturbed by what people are saying. Their views are not our views. And I have this knee-jerk reflex that I've got to be right, which means the other person has to be wrong, all of which is coming from my ego. So normally, if someone was talking, just imagine in today's political climate, if you disagree with somebody on anything out there in that very hot politic world, like some relative or something. So here you are, they're in your house, they're about to leave in 15 minutes, and they rudely read out loud a newspaper article that they know you're going to be so upset about. So for you, it could be enormous work just to not respond. You could go even higher and work on yourself and say, oh, that was such an interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing it with me. Now, that's not what you're feeling like at all. But since you recognize what you're feeling like is coming from ego, you want to nullify that. You want to mivatel yourself, negate yourself, to be able not to argue, not to feel a need. A lot of us have a very high need to show we're right. The other person's wrong because I'm right. And that's all ego. So if I'm just not allowing myself to go there and show you you're wrong and show I'm right, I'll give you a little example that happened this morning. It's a very small example, but I don't remember all the details, but it's such a small example. I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was something like my husband asked me to make him a coffee. He was running, he was this, he called me like a minute before he came if I could make him a coffee, and then he came, and I'm like, and I knew he was in a rush. I'm like, oh, okay, like, he said the water didn't boil. I said no. So I turned off the water. And then he, whatever, did what he do. And he's like, wait, the water's not boiled yet? I'm like, oh, and of course, the knee-jerk response is to say, you didn't tell me that I should still make the coffee. You didn't tell me that you were going to stay until the coffee is ready. You told me you were in a massive rush. You said make such a small cup because it has to be ready when you come. But I didn't say any of those things. I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I misunderstood. So, hey, that was a major success story.
Victory.
Victory. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little. Thank God it wasn't as difficult.
That's not an exaggeration.
But the point is, our nature is to say, what are you saying? I did something wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. Actually, I think you did something wrong. And that whole need to justify myself, to show I'm clean because you're dirty, to show you were the one not clear. So there was a whole series of things like that happened this morning. Very small, very small thing. But I just kept saying, I'm so sorry. I'm just so exhausted. I'm misunderstanding. I forgot this. I didn't do this. It's all my fault. To not go in that direction of the ego. So keeping your mouth shut instead of showing the other person they're wrong, or showing how you're right, or expressing your opinion because your opinion's correct and their opinion is wrong, all of that is ego. And therefore, not allowing yourself to say any of those things is a great step forward. If you've mastered that step, and you would never say anything like that. So take it to the next level and say something so nicely uplifting the other person. Instead of saying, like my example with the article, like, why do you read that to me? I disagree. It's offensive. Or how can you think that? How can you think that when that's so obviously wrong? Or, this whole newspaper is so slanted. I'm surprised someone like you would even look at it. If you want really objective news, you should go to whatever. So you would never say any bad stuff. Of course not. You just keep quiet. So stretch yourself and say, like I said, whatever, like, wow, that was such an interesting perspective, different from mine, and I appreciated hearing it. That's a beautiful, egoless statement. That's an embracive, inclusive statement. You can say, how could I say that when I'm too busy gritting my teeth not to say anything negative? Well, then you can't. But when you've mastered that first step, then you can go the next step and stretch further and create that beautiful energy. Now, someone said, if you're dealing not with a healthy person, it might not go as smoothly. That's true, but right now, honestly, if you will, we're in a sense being self-centered. We're concerned with ourselves. We're concerned with our own ego. So it doesn't really make a difference how the other person responds. That's not our issue right now. Our issue is our own problems. So if you say, well, if I would say, oh, that's so interesting, thank you for sharing, the other person could say, why are you saying that? I know you disagree. Or the other person can say, well, I'm glad you finally woke up after all these years of insisting so-and-so is right, when I'm like, I'm glad you finally got it. The other can say any number of nasty things. So what? It's another Bittel experience. I can hear the nasty things. Generally, if we know a person's not healthy, their nastiness doesn't really harm us, doesn't really affect us, because we just protect ourselves within the walls of, no, they're really not healthy to say things like that.
Right.
So
if you rule those different things, you're actually making it very good for yourself.
Right.
Whatever level you choose, it's good to do it, because you said it doesn't really matter what their reaction is. I mean,
exactly.
If you know they're not healthy, then you maybe wouldn't respond. But whatever response
but even if you responded and you knew that they're going to respond that way, it doesn't make a difference.
No.
Because you're looking to grow. Right. You're looking to be able, I feel like a person has to tell themselves, I'm strong enough to be wrong. I'm strong enough to give in. I'm strong enough to act like I made the mistake. Mm-hmm. Like a husband and wife situation where the husband gets so upset because he feels so stupid every time he does something wrong. So a wise wife would act like she did something wrong. He picks up the bag of groceries and it spills all over the place. And he's thinking, I'm such a dunce. And he's therefore getting upset himself. And therefore he's going to be in a very bad mood. So the wise wife would avert this whole calamity by saying, oh my gosh, I don't know why I always do that. I always put in more items than should go in those bags. I don't know why I'm still doing that. Mm. Now, me in my ego-driven state would be, I did nothing wrong. Why am I acting like I did something wrong? He's a klutz. Why should I show as if I have a problem? I don't have a problem. But if you're strong enough, comfortable enough with yourself, you can be so comfortable to stretch and act like you did the wrong to protect him from feeling like an idiot, to protect yourself from the bad mood he's going to be in when he thinks he's an idiot. So sometimes our best way of healing somebody is by accepting the mistake we didn't even make to protect them. But to do that, you have to be free enough of your ego. Because if we're not free enough of our ego, we don't feel secure enough to not only not admit to a mistake I didn't make. I mean, that's ridiculous. Only if you have an ego that's making you feel so fragile. But if you overcame your frail ego, I'm strong enough to make mistakes. I'm strong enough even to make mistakes that I didn't make. I'm comfortable enough with myself to take responsibility for things I didn't do wrong. If that will facilitate the whole situation, I'm in. And that requires a lot of ego work. But it works. And it's very, very, very beneficial in a lot of relationships. Okay, so we're going to now look at the last section we're going to be doing, which is section 17. So this klipa, this evil of Midian, remember, this is the energy we're talking about, Midian, because Midian comes from the word madon, contentiousness, mariva, argumentation, divisiveness, separation, dissension. This is all the roots of baseless hatred, of hating a person and then figuring out why, and then creating a label to rationalize your negativity. But your negativity is because of your ego, because someone else is taking up my space. Just by their being, they didn't have to do anything wrong. Their existence diminishes my existence. And that's why I hate them. But that's not politically correct to say it like that. So then I've got to make up some excuse. So this baseless hatred is enrooted in the madon, in the mariva, in the ego, in all of these factors, which is the absolute antithesis of God's energy, as expressed in his primordial name, Havaya, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. Because Havaya, every name has a different energy. And Havaya is the idea of inclusiveness, oneness. So we have the name Havaya, oneness, and we have the name Midian, dissension, divisiveness. So the Midian energy is in direct conflict with, is trying to smash the Havaya energy. Because Havaya is, we're all one. And Midian is, no way are we one. We are separate. And I am definitely separate from all these other beings that otherwise would squash me. And I'm not going to be squashed. Sorry, someone put up a chat and I didn't see it. Oh, okay. Sure. So nice you joined, Deborah. Good night. And yes, there'll be a recording later. Now this Midian, as we said initially, and now we can understand far more deeply, is far worse than the 7 nations that were in Israel. Meaning, Midian is not in Israel. It's a nation that the Jews fought and conquered outside of Israel. And we're being told in Midian all of these extreme things, like this is the war of God, like Moshe has to fight this war, all these things that make it very intense. And we're like, why is this so different from the wars the Jews are going to have when they enter Israel and conquer the 7 nations? So we're saying on a spiritual level, and this of course reflects back to what we said in the previous section, that each of those 7 nations represent evil, but each one represents a certain specific evil trait. Midian is a totality of it all. Midian is a comprehensive principle. Midian is the ego that's the essence dissension in all things that are wrong. So that's why the 7 nations are not directly attacking Havaya, unity, oneness, inclusion, but Midian is. So Midian is fighting Havaya, and therefore defeating Midian is Havaya's war, as we raised in the beginning of this discourse. So that's why, if we're talking about, let's say, I think the Plishtim were inappropriate love, right? So we have love, wrong. That's one trait. And because it's one specific trait, we can work on it and overcome it, because it's not everything's wrong. This one aspect of me is wrong. Meaning I could be all in place in my other aspects, and this one aspect is not in order. But when Midian is wrong, when I'm in this space of ego, I'm in this space of baseless hatred, I'm in this space of feeling everyone is encroaching on me, then everything's going to be wrong. And it's really hard to correct. And then the Rebbe gives a very, very powerful example of this point. To me, this is like one of my strongest takeaways from the Mimer is this line, because it's so powerful, it's so true. The Rebbe says, for the destruction of the first temple, the Jews were doing the most horrific sins: idolatry, adultery, and murder. The big 3. And for these sins, they were exiled for 70 years. Because it took 70 years to cleanse the evil of those 3 sins. For the second temple, we weren't doing idolatry. That was taken away. We weren't doing adultery, and we weren't doing murder. What was the sin that destroyed the second temple? Baseless hatred. Midian. And when the Rebbe Rashab wrote this, he writes, it's been over 1,800 years. We could say it's been over 1,900 years. But he writes, it's been over 1,800 years and we haven't gotten through this evil yet. So idolatry, adultery, and murder, I can cleanse up that filth in 70 years. And baseless hatred, I could work on it for 1,900 years and still not be done. Which proves so strongly the Rebbe's point of the enormous qualitative difference here when we're talking about an evil that's like the foundational premise of all evils. That's the overarching total of all evils. And that's why it's so difficult to overcome and to eradicate, as Masha said. I believe it was Masha who said, well, it's really hard to get rid of. And she's right. And the Rebbe Rashab is saying the same thing. It's really hard to get rid of. That shows us how intensely powerful is this evil. Imagine what he's comparing it to. Idolatry, adultery, murder, baseless hatred. These, 70 years we got rid of them. This, 1,900 years we didn't finish it. That shows the enormity of evil here. That shows its power. That shows it is the roots of evil, which is the Rebbe's point here. And that's why it's not like, okay, so, I'll work on myself. I'll stop having such baseless hatred. It's very deep because it's the roots of evil. So the Rebbe continues. That why is it that for baseless hatred at the Rebbe Rashab's time, we've worked on it for over 1,800 years and we're not done yet? Because it's a comprehensive issue. If a person is sinning, God forbid, with adultery, that's a horrible, huge transgression. But in theory, and it sounds weird, but it's probably true, there could be people that keep kosher and keep Shabbos and daven and learn Torah, and they have this one horrific weakness that they're not controlling. But when someone is allowing themselves to stew in ego, everything's wrong. Because it's going to be in everything. It's going to express itself in all of these uglinesses because it just spills over into everything because it's the comprehensive energy of all evil. And that's why it's really hard to get rid of. And that's why it's really powerful. And that's why it's really important to get rid of it. Important to fight it. Important to focus on it. Because it could spill into so many areas and does. Not it could, it does. So imagine how different you would be if you got rid of this. Imagine if someone suffered from whatever, rejection as a child. Maybe she's a sensitive person and her siblings were teasing her and her classmates were teasing her. She didn't have the greatest home situation. And she grows up feeling everyone's making fun of me. Everyone rejects me. Nobody likes me. She moves on. She becomes this seemingly successful adult. But inside of her, she has that child who feels rejected, who feels disliked, who feels victimized. So PTSD, anyone makes some tiny little comment, boom, they're out to get me. Boom, they're hurting me. Boom, they're saying that to make fun of me. They're not even thinking about you. But when you have this issue, it just spills over into everything. And that's why the Rebbe is saying it's so important to deal with it. And it's so comprehensive. It's, again, like attacking the name Havaya. Havaya is the absolute unity, and Midian's the absolute antithesis of that, the absolute dissension. And that's why it's so important to deal with it and so difficult to deal with it. So we understand now why, a question we raised in the very beginning of the Maimer, we call this fighting the vengeance of Havaya. If you remember in the beginning of the Maimer, we said, why are we saying it's Havaya's war? The Midyanim didn't overtly attack God, they harmed the Jewish people. And we said maybe because Jewish people and God were one, but like it wasn't a good enough answer for us. So the Rebbe says, after finishing 17 sections, you understand. The Midyanim are attacking Havaya. On the surface, they're harming the Jews. But their whole existence is attacking Havaya. Their whole existence is the embodiment of the antithesis of Havaya. And that is why the one that was the key catalyst to destroy them was Moshe. If you remember, that was actually the first question we raised at enormous length in this mimer. It took up most of the first section of the talk, was why Moshe? Why does God make the whole war contingent on Moshe to the degree that Moshe can't die until this war is fought? And this is Moshe's war. And why? Why was Moshe had to be so much personally the fighter in Midian, even though he personally didn't go out, but he was the energy of that war to the degree that his own shleimus, his own existence was contingent on it? Well, the Rebbe says because Moshe represents absolute bittul. Moshe represents the negation of Midian, because Moshe represents Havaya. Moshe represents inclusion. Moshe represents unity. Moshe represents lack of self. And that's the person we need to destroy Midian. Right? Like it says about Moshe that he was the most humble man that ever walked the face of the earth. Right? Pretty impressive line. Moshe Anam, Adama. That's what the Torah says about Moshe. He was the most humble man that ever lived in all 5,781 years, of which there were many great tzaddikim that were very humble, but Moshe's complete negation of self was even deeper. He's the man. He is the man for the job. Because if the issue is Midian as this energy of yesh, of self, it doesn't help me if I bring 100,000 troops. I could bring one person, but a person of absolute bittul. That's the energy that will destroy Midian. So this answers the question that we raised extensively in the first section of this talk, which in brief is, why Moshe? Why was he the one that needed to fight this war? So we understand, we had 3 questions we raised in the beginning that we're dealing with here. Why are we saying the vengeance of Havaya? The Midianim harmed the Jews. Their energy harms Havaya. Why is it Moshe's war? What does he have to do with it? Because Moshe represents the ultimate bittul, the ultimate negation of self, the ultimate negation of ego. And a person that's absolute negation, he can fight that war. He can destroy Midian. And that's why Moshe said, which we raised as a quasi-grammatical question, says Hachaltzu me itchem, which is sort of like a conflict of terms, if you remember, because it was only 12,000 people, only 12,000 soldiers. I mean, Moshe could have sent 100,000 soldiers. He could have sent 200,000 soldiers. But it was a spiritual war. He didn't need 200,000 soldiers. He didn't need 100,000 soldiers. He didn't need 50,000 soldiers. He didn't need 20,000 soldiers. He wanted 1,000 from each tribe. So a very small number, 12,000 people. We have 3 million Jews. Or 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, and you pick 12,000. But yet he used the term Hachaltzu, which implies all of you. So I was saying all of you when it's actually a very small number from you. So the Rebbe explains here the all of you is because that's how we fight this war. When we're in a space that it's all of us together, all of us as one. If it would be Hachaltzu, like each one of us should arm ourselves, should fortify ourselves. So I'm me, and Elka's her, and Toby's her, and Masha's her, and Yudit, and Rachaleah. Each one of us in our own little worlds fortifying myself. That's not how you fight Midian. You fight Midian because it's Hachaltzu. It's all of you together as one entity. Again, just as Moshe, the antithesis of Midian, his being is a destruction of Midian. When we are Ba'achtus, we destroy Midian. And that's why it's not Hachaltzu. Each one of you arm yourselves, fortify yourselves. It's Hachaltzu. All of you together. So with that, we answer the first 3 questions of this mimer. Why is it Moshe's war? Because he's the one that needs to do it. He's the one that represents the other energy. He's the one of egoless reality. That's how you fight ego, with someone who's egoless. Why is it God's vengeance? The Midianim started up with the Jews. The Midianim physically started with the Jews. Their energy starts up with God, Havaya specifically. And why is it Hachaltzu? Because only when we're in a space of Hachaltzu can we destroy Midian. Not when we're in a space of Hachaltzu. Not when it's each man for himself, but when it's all of us together. And with that, we conclude answering the first 3 fundamental questions of this mimer and concluding the 17th section, which means we're at a very, very good breaking point. I know you did had raised with me, should we continue later or no? And I basically said, whatever's good for you. I gave over with her to her the classes I give now, even though actually my schedule's changed with one of them, sorry. My Sunday night class is now becoming a Monday morning class. So it doesn't exist as a Sunday night class. It's going to be an in-person Monday morning class. Everyone's so excited that they're seeing that COVID's over on some level. But you're definitely welcome to join the Tuesday night class. We are the Wednesday night class. But you can definitely join the Tuesday night class and learn that way, or you can go on the YouTube channel, Benos Rabbeinu, and watch any of the classes that are there and decide if you want to continue this or continue something else or not. It all works. Thank you so much for this opportunity to restudy this mimer. I enjoyed it very, very, very much. I hope
Can I ask you a question?
something because of it.
Can I ask you a
That's
question?
the point. Sure.
So this third question about why it's Hachaltzu, not Yechaltzu, I understand the answer, but on a Ruchnis level, I guess, that's how Midian was able to defeat, I mean, that's how the Jews were able to defeat Midian.
Exactly.
But for us, what does that mean?
So it means the Rebbe is saying the same thing. If you want to overcome ego, which is defeating the Midian inside of you,
right?
The first step to that is Hachaltzu, is being inclusive, is being embracive, is not viewing self as separate, which is the Midian energy, but viewing self as within the cloud. The best way to overcome the personalized Midian is by that perspective that it's a Hachaltzu, it's not a Yechaltzu. Which goes back to, you know, some of the things we said earlier, like even if you think someone else is not as firm as you, Hasidic as you, smart as you, good as you, knowledgeable as you, experienced as you, it's okay, they don't have to be. You could still embracively join with them, forbrain with them, work with them, put your ego aside, and even if you know you're right and therefore they're obviously wrong, go with them anyway. See where it leads you. That's Hachaltzu. And when you act that way, you have the ability to overcome your Midian.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody
Thank
else have
you.
any questions?
Your Tuesday night class is the same as this? It's Hachaltzu?
No, not at all. It's not this at all. I was just,
okay.
Yujit was trying to figure out what will be an alternative option. I was talking, assuming she had discussed this. I guess she didn't, so I'm preempting her. So I'll let her discuss it later on your group or whatever we discuss. I'm just saying that my Sunday night class is now Monday morning, so that's not an option. That's Sunday night anymore. But we discussed it, and she'll you know, play out those options. But what I was saying, Bekitzer, is I do have a Tanya class Tuesday night, 9:30 Baltimore time, so it's quite late for you guys. Very long running class that we just started doing on Zoom at a certain point in Corona, and we just started recording it at a certain point in Corona. But it's been like that for several weeks. My Monday morning class is now going to be 10:45 your time, but I don't know if it's going to be a Zoom class or not. I want it to be, but I have some people in the class that I don't think want it to be. So we're gonna see what happens. If I can make it work and make everyone comfortable with it being in person and Zoom. So
Thank you.
I don't know. But if it is, Mr. Hashem, remember to ask me like this time next week, and I'll tell you how it went on Monday. This Monday is the first time we're switching it from Sunday night Zoom to back to what it was pre-Corona, Monday morning in person.
Well, this has all been wonderful. Thank you.
It's been wonderful for me. It's wonderful. You know, the great experience of teaching is learning. And when you're teaching something as avoidadik, forcing you to like work on yourself, the hardest thing in the world, of course, is to work on yourself. The hardest energy of change is self. So it was great. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
Really did.
Appreciate it.
Hope I shall not lose
you.
focus now that we've finished our learning. I hope my focus should
Right.
be intact. And I give
Ongoing.
that offer to
ongoing.
everyone,
Thank you.
that whatever you gained, and
Bye,
whatever
thank
focus
you.
you gain, don't lose it. Reread your notes.
May.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daryl, do you need a flyer? Can I give you my daughter's phone number? Do you need?
Yeah, possibly. Send, you have my WhatsApp? You have my WhatsApp, right?
I'm not so sure. Indeed has it?
You did. Can you show me my WhatsApp, my number? Because I'm
Okay.
now, if you'll remember, 773-965-7770.
965-7770. Okay.
965-7770. That's for
Okay. No, but I mean, if you do, because she just did one for us and it came
I
out
heard it was
great.
very nice. I heard.
Like to drum up business,
Absolutely. That's what a mother always does.
Yep. And I've enjoyed the class very much.
We gotta be there for our kids, because if we're not, who is?
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I really did. And I really mean it so sincerely. I was so grateful for the class. It was so wonderful to remember all the things I have to work on. So, so I hope I stay
Yeah, but
focused.
positive changes have been made because of this class.
Baruch Hashem. That's the point. This is what the Rebbe wanted.
Yeah.
The Rebbe told you to study this. He had a reason
Yep.
why.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Be well. Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.